Was P90X was pretty early on or not, or no?
We started developing in 2003. It launched in 2005, was a failure for 2 years.
Wow.
And then, but we kept testing it, kept getting success stories from people who were doing it. And then 2007, it just took off and became our first billion-dollar brand. Bikes and treadmills and lifting things. Ultimately, my premise is, well, gravity is free. And the real problem, the reason there's an obesity trend that affects, 175 million people is we don't use gravity enough.
What is a book that you've read, it could be fiction or nonfiction, that was just paradigm shifting for you?
I don't think I've ever said this really in public, but
Carl, my friend, thanks for coming on the podcast.
thank you for having me on, Will. It's great to be here.
I'm just so excited to pick your brain about all things because you have such a unique vantage point that most people don't know. We're going to go sort of the inner, the inside of the beast, so to speak, of the health industry, wellness, and then popular culture. I'd love to get your perspective on that and pick your brain. But let's kind of start with setting the stage on how did you get into this space of fitness, wellness, health, and nutrition?
Well, it started, I think, the way most of the best entrepreneurial stories evolve from personal need. And the first thing, like I have never been a consistent workout person. I'm uncomfortable in the gym. And if I didn't feel like I was going to go, full on type A aggressive, why bother working out? So after college, it really all just fell apart. And I've never liked vegetables, so I didn't eat well. And so by the time I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was not the person who I recognized. And I was working for a marketing company at the time, and I had this idea. I was like, gosh, if I would just do, 10 minutes of something a day would be better than nothing. So I created this video called 8-Minute Abs. And we made a commercial for it, and that thing just took off. It really resonated. And I used it for a little while, and I said to my partner at the time, wow, there's demand for virtual training. Like people don't need a personal trainer, 1 push-up, 2 push-ups, 3 push-ups. They just need the information so that they can follow it at home. Because there's got to be other people who don't like gyms like me. So he said, no, let's go in this other direction. I'm going to go in the media direction. I said, no, thanks. Sold my part of the business back to him. And then started what was Beachbody, and that became BODi. And just really for 26 years have been solving my own problem. And that is trying to find a way to create consistency in my life when I'm a driven person, work is my thing. And so this has been a process now, 26 years in the making, of literally trying to solve my own problem.
Wow. So go back 26 years of, well, I guess when Beachbody started. How far into, what was the first official Beachbody project I would want to ask? And then how early on was P90X was pretty early on or not, or no?
No. Well, P90X happened probably 6 years into the business. So we basically, our first big program was called Power 90. And that was just basically, again, for people who are busy and they're like, I'm not going to be able to change my lifestyle and all of a sudden become a fitness lover, but I want to lose the 25 pounds. So I'm going to devote 90 days, what we would call a Power 90. And it was a very simple, resistance training one day, cardio the next day, and abs. And that would alternate for 6 days a week, plus sort of a portion control approach to healthier eating. And like, there was just 4 of us in an office, and that product did like $33 million its first year. So I was like, well, wait a minute. This is somebody's going to knock us off. That was too easy. So we created a 6-week program called Slim in 6, and that was even more aggressive. Like the training was harder and longer, probably quasi overtraining, but that did 36 million in its first year. So we're like, we're on to something. So as we were selling these Power 90s, that was the first thing we did with the first full program we did with Tony Horton. There was a point I said, look, we've got, now 1 million people have bought Power 90 and they want the next thing. And like I said, Will, I was solving my own problem. I was about to turn 40 and I'd never really had abs, never been completely like lean, like a cover of a magazine lean. And so we called it the last hurrah. I wanted to, for once in my life, dial it all in. And I said to Tony, I want Power 90 Extreme. And he turned me down. He said, no, I don't want to do it. Let's go for, let's help. We've got an obesity problem. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do it with somebody and I'd like it to be you. So he decided to do it with us and he came up with this great idea, this great approach to what we call muscle confusion to avoid this plateau that people would get in the middle of 90 days. And that launched, we started to develop it in 2003. It launched in 2005, was a failure for 2 years.
Wow.
And then, but we kept testing it, kept getting success stories from people who were doing it. And then 2007, it just took off and became our first $1 billion brand. Crazy story.
Crazy story. Why do you think it was a failure the first couple of, time? You said a few years, right? I mean, what was the tipping point or the pivot for it to be such a takeoff success?
Yeah, I think it's a really great case study in how hard it is to market fitness that takes work. So infomercials at the time were, easy little stepper things or Thigh Master, like all these things that sort of a rational person would look at and be like, well, that's not going to get me results. I've gotten results before, and that little thing is just going to do this one little muscle. So the premise was there's got to be 1 million people like me out there who want to see something sensible that takes hard work. And it's just hard to find those 1 million people efficiently. So we, over the course of the 2 years, as we were testing, we went through price testing and offer testing, and then also incorporating more women and showing women lifting and showing how their bodies would just completely transform once they stopped beating their heads against the wall with intense cardio, thinking that that was the answer. And instead saw that a balance of lifting, cardio, functional training, and periodization, type training. And once we balanced it, male and female, and showed these outrageous success stories. And we were sort of the first ones to take a reality TV approach to infomercials, where people would just send us in their videos. And so the shots were crazy. Like there would be just like their little head in the corner of this whole shot. And it was just like, well, that couldn't have been shot professionally. That's got to be real, because nobody would shoot anything looking that awful. And the shows became, because of the colorful nature of the real people, farmers in the Midwest, like showing how many bales of hay they could lift now. Like these shows became watchable, and people would just literally tune into the P90X infomercial because it was so fun to watch.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You take me back to that time, because like I was a consumer. I mean, I bought P90X, the big DVD book. It was like a book of DVDs, and I was like religiously doing it at that time. And so at that point, it's your first $1 billion project. Are you then thinking, how are we going to top this? Or was there a sense of like, how could we do better than this?
I've been scared to death for 26 years, like always feeling like this is going to evaporate. Like how many ideas could we possibly have? Right. And that's what actually, if there's one thing that surprises me around the business, once it got successful, it's how many different ways there are to package content in a way that sort of breaks through to somebody who was waiting for something to speak to them. I'll tell you an interesting story. 21-day fix was this idea that I had for a 21-day program, 7 days a week, and with a portion control approach to nutrition. So like really make it simple, just like how much protein, how much vegetables, like what do I need to do so that I know I'm going to get the results I want, but I'm not going to starve, right? And the whole company said that I was crazy. Nobody's going to get results in 21 days. They won't be significant enough when you compare it to like a P90X. And I said, well, people can repeat it. If they see results in 3 weeks, then they'll want to repeat it. And we found this trainer, Autumn Calabrese, and even she was a little bit skeptical at first, like 3 weeks, I'm not going to be able to compete with P90X or Power 90 or Slim in 6. And but she had a portion control nutrition program that she had developed that was perfect. And we refashioned that a little bit with her color containers, and she did such a fantastic job. And that program is what took the company took off with that new way of packaging the same thing, basically a sensible approach, half hour a day, right in your living room, no fancy equipment. But we also solved the food issue in a really simple way with that. So my point is that there's all these breakthroughs. You see, connected fitness, and even we got into that for a while, like bikes and treadmills and lifting things. Ultimately, my premise is, gravity is free. And the real problem, the reason there's an obesity trend that affects, 175 million people is we don't use gravity enough. And it's not the fact that I don't have the best machine or some expensive thing or a membership at a gym. I'm just not making time for it and not finding a way to make it fun for myself. So that's what we did. We just sort of gamified it in a way that's just not over the top techie. It's just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow it through, do it for 21 days, do it for 100 workouts, whatever it was. That is really the model that served us well for 26 years.
It's so true. I mean, and we're talking about all these iconic zeitgeist things within wellness that you are the mind behind it. It's such an awesome, this conversation. I want people to go back and listen to it. So 21 Day Fix, that's how we actually met, was through Autumn Calabrese, mutual friend of us. That we'll talk about the project that we worked on in a bit. We'll leave people hanging. But what's the story behind Insanity, the Insanity workout? Another legendary, everyone knows
Insanity is a great story. So again, sort of derivative of P90X, but we had done a program after P90X called, or maybe it was right before P90X, called Hip Hop Abs, that we did with this trainer, Sean T, who was a dancer. And we were running a test group with Kathy Smith with a program that we developed with her. And we noticed that when he would sub for her on the weekends with his sort of dance program workout, the place was packed and they were having a blast. And so he became like the fun abs dance guy. But I had this other idea. I wanted something that was literally the hardest workout video ever produced. That was the idea. That's why the name Insanity. And the development team said, well, why don't you ask Sean? And I'm like, no, he's the dance guy. He's not going to be able to do this. Like, I want somebody, this is going to be something that people cannot finish. That's how hard this is going to be. And Sean said, hey, I was a track star in college. You got to let me try. So we did a screen test with him and 2 fitness people for 20 minutes of what he developed, which was basically a cardio, no weights, body weight program. And he did this 15, 20-minute workout, and literally the 2 background people that he was working out with couldn't finish it. Like, the one guy took a water bottle and he threw it against the wall. He was so angry that he couldn't finish it. And Sean just was like, well, the heck with y'all, I'm just going to finish this thing. And it was like magic. I was watching magic in front of me. We shot the workouts with a bunch of people who become sort of Beachbody fans in a big basketball court in New York, I think it was, like Brooklyn or somewhere. And it was just literally iconic. what he had to do to help people finish these workouts from, 45 minutes or so of just the hardest thing. And like literally, it was funny because the infomercial, we would say that money back guarantee, you have a 30-day money back guarantee. But in the Insanity infomercial, we would say, look, insanity is not for everybody. So if you can't finish this, we don't want you to keep it. We want you to send it back because this is for a very special group of people. And that made people aspire to be, I want to be in that club, and they would do it. And that thing just, again, became another phenomenon. And, Sean created so many iterations of it. And it was just wild to see people, again, the whole infomercial industry was scratching their head at us because it was all, don't show them sweating. Don't show them doing push-ups and wall squats and pull-ups and like all this stuff. And then here we were, P90X and Turbo Fire and Insanity and Body Beast. Like we were breaking all the molds.
They really were. So were those other ones instant successes, like the 21-day fix and Insanity, or did they take some time to kick off?
Insanity took some time. Yeah, that was a real process. Hip Hop Abs was an instant success. Like that was a success in a heartbeat. 21-day fix was an instant success. Because we had a test group. We would run a test group, and usually we would have employees test these things out. Because one of the rules that we have at the company is we will not sell something that doesn't deliver on its promise. So like we had done a program, sort of an abs type of program, and it didn't deliver. So we just killed it in the middle of the project. But so we were testing 21-day fix, and we had like this guy in customer service fell in love with it and the container program. And he was inspiring everybody in customer service, and he kept doing it over and over again. I think he lost close to 100 pounds doing 21-day fix over and over again. So these were the people. So eventually when the infomercial came out, they were the ones in the infomercial, and you just couldn't deny it. It was like just impossible. The results that they got would have been impossible to Photoshop, right? And so it's a mix. Like sometimes they were just hits out of the gate, and sometimes it takes a while to build sort of the foundation of results and proof that people need to see, and frankly, to even get the story right, so that people go, oh yeah, that's the thing that I want to do.
And you mentioned this magic formula, if you will, or maybe synergy of men and women. And you're right. So even today, but you've done a lot through these efforts over the years of awakening more and more women to the fact to not fear weight training, right? And it's interesting that all these years you talk about how many people, millions and millions of people that you've impacted to move their body, not be afraid of weights, and balancing it with cardio. But there's still so many people, especially women, that don't get that, right? I mean, they think cardio is a way they are going to get bulky. Can you kind of bust that myth for women that are still kind of not realizing the importance of implementing some weight training throughout their week?
I think this is something that you've advocated so well, and that's look, if you're looking for results in 3 or 4 days, first off, those results are probably going to be water, and you might even have an adverse effect because you're going to trigger a cortisol response, which is going to create inflammatory, and all your clothes are going to feel tight. So like if you just go like bomb yourself with cardio, it's going to be a disappointment. Now, after a week or two, you might see some results, but ultimately your metabolism is going to catch up with you because you're going to eat into muscle. So once people, and this is what happened with Body Beast, we got this bodybuilder, a guy named Sagi Kalev, just created this beautiful 12-week program, but it was all men who were attracted to it at first. But then as women started to do it, the transformations that they got with very little cardio and even transcending the vanity metrics, and people started to talk about pain and stiffness going away, things that had been bothering them that they were afraid to lift because of aches in their shoulders and elbows and knees. And then they just realized they hadn't been doing anything to stabilize the joints, to build muscle around the joints, to strengthen and exercise the ligaments and tendons so that everything got tighter. And once they started to lift, like the women who went through these programs, they became such powerful advocates for healthy lifestyle that's when the company really took off. When it moved from being purely the vanity show, let me see what my before and afters are,
Yeah.
and went to people talking about achieving things and doing things that they had completely lost touch with since they'd been athletes, you know?
So you mentioned 21 Day Fix and the project with Autumn being a really seminal moment in Beachbody's history. You mentioned kind of the marrying of the food with the fitness. What was that time like? Because when we met each other for the first time and I was talking about all the things you've done, my whole team, like everyone had done the 21 Day Fix. Like they all had like the everything that they needed from this. So you hit such a different level with that. What was that time like?
You know, when it was so busy and so wildly exciting that I've honestly, I've never stopped to enjoy it because, like I said, I was always afraid that we weren't going to live up to the demand, or then because these things become hits when they burn really hot. So you need another thing.
Yeah.
And so it was like, again, how are we going to follow this up? Like, what's the next thing? And all those people doing 21 Day Fix, then they wanted to do 21 Day Fix Extreme. Then we created 21 Day Fix Real Time, which was like the original 21 Day Fix was 7 workouts that you repeated. Then the 21 Day Fix Real Time was 21 workouts that you would do, and it felt like you were doing it with a cast. Then after that, because Autumn was so successful with this combination of fitness and nutrition, she created something called 80-Day Obsession. Because we had a lot of people, like women would be like, I want to flatten my abs, but I also want to build my butt. How can I do that at the same time? And that's like, okay, you can do that, but you need to feed yourself in a very specific way. You cannot starve yourself to get a firm lifted butt, right? And a bubble butt kind of thing. So Autumn created this thing, 80-Day Obsession. And in 2018, it was a monster home run. Like, so this really, these were the breakthroughs that each time, not only would we be gratified that we just helped a whole bunch of people find a new thing for themselves, we would just be blown away that, you know, you peel another layer of the onion and like, oh, there's another thing. Like that's another thing that we were missing. And it's just a wild process. Like, you know, you get an idea and present it to the team. And usually when the team rejects it, I know we're on to something. There was a program. I was flying over Indianapolis, and I saw, you know, if it's a clear day, you can look down, you can see what's going on. And I saw the Indianapolis Speedway where they do the Indianapolis 500. And I was just thinking about that idea. You know, that's 500 laps. That's a really cool, quantifiable thing. I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat for people just to get to 100 workouts? Like if they knew that each lap of that workout, they were going to burn off a layer of fat. So I presented to the team the name Morning Meltdown 100, and the team hated it. I said, no. People like to work out in the morning. They want to know that they're melting off a layer of fat, and they're going to do it 100 times. Very easy, quantifiable. And they were like, many people don't like to work out in the morning, and a meltdown is the thing you associate with your toddler in the aisle of the grocery store, and 100's too big a number. And but it was like the first program we did that got more than 50 million views. Like that's how big that program was. So you just never know, and it's fun to keep inventing.
I love it. It's inventing, the sort of curating like having written books myself. Like I'm not in your space, but like I would say patient protocols, there's an artistic aspect to it. Writing books, there's an artistic aspect. Have you always had that creative mind where you have these sort of aha moments and you just have to write it down or tell someone?
I think I have, but it wasn't really until 8-Minute Abs that I realized I had permission to put it in gear and make it a thing, because it seemed like such an obvious little stupid thing to me.
Yeah.
But even the idea, the original 8-minute abs came from a friend of mine from college had been doing buns of steel. And I was like, come on, man. He was a wrestler, like a real man's man. I'm like, you're not doing buns of steel videotape. He's like, yeah, it's just 10 minutes. And I looked at it and I said, no, it's a 60-minute video. He said, no, they're just a bunch of 10-minute. I was like, well, they left the real hook. Like nobody knows it was just 10 minutes. So I'm like, okay, that's marketable. So that's what led me to, let me put the real hook in the name of it, 8-minute abs.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, that's why so many of our programs have numbers in them, like
Yeah.
21-day fix, power 90,
P90X.
we've got 10-minute trainer, like
Yes, I
transform
did that
20.
one.
Yeah,
Tony Horton did that one too, right? 10
that's
minute.
right.
Yeah, I love that too. And I didn't have the time for P90X. 10-minute trainer, my brother-in-law who lived with me at the time, we were in our 20s, and we both would do it together. Still to this day, we talk about it.
Crazy.
Okay, so we talk about these different eras, if you will, these times in American Western history of the late 90s, Y2K, 2000s, 2010s, and now. How has, but going through all of that time in this industry, how has the industry changed in that time span? And would you say it's net positive or negative?
Well, nothing stands still. I would say a couple of things. First off, if you judge the overall fitness and nutrition industry, there's something that's still broken since the obesity trend is getting worse. Now, I don't think the industry can take all the blame because it's very difficult to compete with the gratification economy, where processed food is delicious and it's so available and so inexpensive. And there's so much more entertainment now than there was 30 years ago that it's that making time for the work, which feels like work, is very difficult. But I would say over the course of our 26 years, what really changed, first, the content went digital, which was a big change because when it was on VHS tapes and DVDs, you had something coming out of a box, which people would associate a value to. Now, with streaming services and particularly YouTube, is digital and it's kind of free everywhere. So even though one of these programs can cost us $2 to $5 million to get the whole thing going, it's supposed to be free because it's free on YouTube, right? So, but for the stuff that works and has been tested, that has real value. But that has been a thing that's made it more difficult to market it. The other thing is, for all the criticism of the infomercial, what the infomercial did for us with legitimate, real programs was be able to tell a whole story and give people a rationale for why a particular program would work. Like, overcoming the plateau effect with muscle confusion. Every program would have something that it was doing, a problem that it was solving, that we could tell that story in a half hour. It's very difficult to do that now on Facebook with a little square, right? Now, and then the third thing, well, there's four things. The third thing that I would say is the social media companies, because of the swell of body positivity and the criticism of social media being a place for comparison and judgment, that the social media networks will no longer allow you to advertise before and after photos. Like, you can't do it anymore, which was a powerful part of our business model to represent that something was true. And losing that, really, while it was positive in some respects, is a disservice. Somebody who needs to lose 100 pounds, they're not just going to do it because, it'll feel good in my doctor. Like, they need to see something real that they believe, that they can aspire to. And we lost that. And then the last thing that I would say is that the GLP-1s come in with that, they're super expensive, semaglutides, amazing opportunity particularly for diabetics, type 2 diabetes, to get control over their cravings and behavior. But not enough is being said about the requirement. Literally, there should be a regulatory requirement. In order to get the shot, you've got to do your workouts and you've got to
Yeah.
consume the right macros, because otherwise you're undermining your metabolism and the outcome is going to be devastating. And so those four things have made it much more difficult in this environment for all fitness and nutrition companies to compete.
Wow. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, these are the things that you worded it so succinctly. So let's kind of unpack some of those things. The first thing that you mentioned that I didn't fully think about, I guess not being in the space, was the streaming aspect of it. You're right. It's sort of, it cheapens sort of the value of what you're providing and like the amount of time and money and effort it takes to produce that something. But we see that across the board, right? I talked to, again, someone not in my space, Ellen Pompeo. She's an actress. She's Grey's Anatomy, right? Massive star. But she was shedding some light on the fact that that's what's happening in the TV industry, right? It's like with the SAG-AFTRA strikes and the actor strikes, that most actors are really struggling and not making money, but at least because of YouTube and Netflix and all, Hulu and all the streaming, most actors don't actually make pennies off of these things. And that, what hurt Hollywood is also kind of, it hurt your space as well. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Well, it's again, the devaluation of content, like
And
particularly
experts.
because everybody can be an Instagram or TikTok star now.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about something that needs to have a predictable outcome, so like every trainer could become a Beachbody content creator of their own with YouTube during the pandemic, right? So you had this huge swell of new content. But what it doesn't have is predictability of outcome. Like our tagline is for BODi is fast results step by step. Like we prove these things. So there's a difference to somebody just sort of randomly trying to be consistent with a collection of workouts that they find on YouTube, or going through a methodical 12-week integrated fitness and nutrition program that has been tested and guaranteed to give you the results that make the work worth the effort. And that's what we can provide. And for that matter, that's worth a few $100 in our, because it costs us that much to develop these things.
Right. Or like you said, like these are experts, they have proven results. And I think that people are getting that. Do you feel like the tide is shifting there where it's like this sort of overconsumption of content? It's not necessarily quality content, and it's not actually producing results for people. They're just consuming it because it's free, but the outcome's not necessarily great. They're not going to see a significant needle mover in their life because it is so disorganized and there's no value to it.
Well, that's the challenge, quite honestly, Will. And that's what keeps me up at night is because most people equate us with just videos that they might find on YouTube. They, once they fail, just like somebody who's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to start running. So they buy an expensive pair of sneakers and they start running, and then they realize, wait, I need a whole plan on this. My knees hurt. I don't know how to go about this in a way that's good for me. So they just go, running doesn't work for me. And what they do is they just stop in general. They create a limiting belief for themselves. This is not my thing. I'm not one of those people. And they put themselves in a category where now gratification and a different lifestyle that is prone to lifestyle disease, that now they're a candidate for that. Where what we need to do as a company is constantly help inform people and show them, demonstrate how our stuff is all tested, like so ferociously. Like we're so vigilant about wanting to make sure that people who put 12 weeks together, these are heroes. Like, because, they're going on this voyage for the first time. And when they prove that something works, man, we try to show that to anybody who will pay attention, because it is not easy for people to change their behaviors in this environment when there's so much stress on people. and it's messing with all their hormones. Everything about their life is in complete disarray, really, since the pandemic. And every time that we can demonstrate that with half hour, 45 minutes a day, you actually can pull it together, that's a miraculous thing to represent to people. And that's what my job is.
Yeah. Let's unpack one of the other things that you said astutely is the sort of what I would call an overcorrection. Like we have sort of diet culture where we're talking about shaming and restriction, and that's never what you stood for as a company. It's never what most of us within wellness. But again, as a culture collectively, there absolutely were people that were advocating for sort of a shame-based, restrictive-based approach versus focusing on health and how somebody feels and feeling good in your own skin and being the best version of you. And that sort of nuance and context gets lost, right, sometimes, and gets taken to an extreme level. But then we overcorrect in our culture where it's health at any size and body positivity, and there's no such thing as a bad food. And we see the chronic disease levels rise. We see the obesity levels rise, and we're sort of placating and enabling a really sick, dysfunctional culture. And we're up against that. Like we're up against sort of this war of the truth, war against the truth, right? Where we're seen as weaponizing it and seeing as negative for just plain truth. And to be honest with you, I always go back to like, if it's someone you love, you want them to live a long, healthy life. It's not shaming anybody for them to call them to something greater. But what's your angle against that? And do you see the tide changing against this sort of overcorrection?
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing that GLP-1s did, is like you had this big body positivity, anything goes, stop shaming me. And then all of a sudden, when there was a miracle pill, that was like, well, actually, I do want to lose weight now that I don't have to work.
I just want it easy with a medication.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, but I think that, you talk about how I combat it. And you said something really interesting. And that is that you combat it with the truth. So it starts with, and we do a thing, we added mindset to the BODi platform. And quite honestly, we changed the name of the company from Beachbody, and we adopted this acronym, Beachbody On Demand Interactive, BODi, BODi, for two reasons. One is my kids were looking over my shoulder at one point. I was working on an infomercial, and they struggle with health and fitness just like anybody. And I realized that the name Beachbody, the connotation was an ideal. Like that wasn't the intent. It was all about comfortable in your own skin, that you're living your best life. That is a beach body, if you will. Yeah. But every week I'm seeing articles of people flaunting their beach body in Malibu, and I'm like, okay, that's not the connotation that I want for a company that can help people who have no desire. They don't care about abs. They don't care about the vanity metrics. They just want to be healthy and play with their kids into their 80s, right? So I'm like, we got to reframe the company. So we changed the name to BODi. And also, I wanted the products to be seen through the lens of what I call an absolute truth, where you've got people with a limited belief, like I said at the beginning, people with a limited belief that I will never have a beach body. I'm not one of those people. Mm-hmm. And we created this category, and we call that the imperfection economy, where the imperfection economy is always sort of picking at somebody's imperfections, and it's built on making somebody feel like they're not enough if they don't have a thigh gap, or they don't have abs, like if you have cake on your birthday, like whatever, like you said, shaming. And instead we said, look, we want to create something that's the opposite of that imperfection economy that preys on people's insecurities. And instead, we want to make them feel good just for showing up on day one. Mm-hmm. And we did a play on the concept of self-esteem, and we call it health esteem, where just by showing up for yourself on day one. That's going to be better for you. And the way that transitions from a limiting belief to an absolute truth is to remind people and to reinforce why you're really doing it. Do you want to be a good role model for your kid? Like, I'm sure it's not just so your genes fit, right? It's because you don't want to get type 2 diabetes. You don't want to have hypertension. You want to be able to walk around in your 90s without assistance. These are my whys. So when I contemplate that, I'm, like I said, I don't like vegetables. I don't like working out. When I contemplate my limiting beliefs and replace it with an absolute truth, of the absolute truth for me is I want to be walking freely in my 90s. I want my kids to see that it's more important to me to wake up early and do my workout than it is to have an extra glass of wine. That these are my absolute truths, and they replace the limited belief. And I think that I'm seeing that happen in the world, where you've got more and more people who don't have to have the ideal physique to be an inspiration. And that's where social media is actually doing some good.
Yeah, I agree. It's a double-edged sword for sure. The before and after sort of crackdown and censorship is wild to me, right? It's like, why we've overcorrected so much that we can't see results, right? You can't see changes. If someone was going to a plastic surgeon, they'd want to see the difference between that facelift, right? What can be. It's not saying, of course, results may vary. Everybody's different. Of course, there's disclaimers there, but do you feel like that sort of social media crackdown on information like that, or even pictures, do you feel like that's going to change with time, or is that still going to be the future of just like not being able to show significant things that are important to the consumer?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball for that. This is what's so valuable about what, for a while, for 17 years, we had a network marketing business. And we moved from that to an affiliate model. But that whole side of the business was built on the fact that real people showing their audience that they got real results is the most powerful form of word of mouth marketing in the world. So if we can't advertise it, they aren't shutting down people from organically showing their own results. So that's why we pay so aggressively to affiliates who sign on to get results with a program, that then they're the ones that can make 40, 50% of the revenue that they help generate, because they're the ones that did the hard work of results. And then they're the ones that can show it. So it's I don't know, I can't judge everything. I can't change everything. We're focusing on trying to convince people and remind people that if you want to retain your mobility, your agility, your mental health, you're going to need to move, and you're going to have to watch what you eat. That is just a fact. And it's not a medication, does not need a disclaimer. If you are eating too much processed food, and particularly too much sugar, you are creating disease in your body. And if you're not paying attention to your proximity to and consumption of plastics, you are absolutely creating a toxic environment in your body that will take you years and years to try to detoxify. So why not pay attention to it now and do it in gradual steps? And that's what we've got to perpetuate.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's like, how far have we fallen as a society that what you're saying, such clear truths, it's just radical revolutionary information, right, to our culture, because that's how far we've fallen, where it's like offensive, right, to be talking about these things.
Yeah, that healthy lifestyle is the outlier. No, I'm trying to live disease-free. Why is that why am I the weird one at this lunch?
Yeah, right. I think that says more about how far we've fallen and not what we're saying here. Okay, so then let's go there. The GLP-1 agonist, the Ozempic, Wegovy, semaglutides, all the different iterations of it. What's going on there? What's your thoughts? You touched on it a few minutes ago, but I'd love to really deep dive on your thoughts with what's the Ozempic craze.
Well, I'm not, I don't know that I'm really in the right position. You're in a much better position than I am to speak on that. But I will say that psychographically, as they would say, or behaviorally, two very dangerous things are happening. it was intended to help people avoid type 2 diabetes and get control of sugar intake, um, and just lose excess fat. But unfortunately, not enough emphasis is put on the fact that not all that weight is fat. In fact, I think I've read that 2/3 of the weight lost over the course of a 6-month span will be muscle, which has a direct impact on your skeletal health, but also your metabolism, which means
Hmm.
it's going to be that much harder to keep the weight off because you got to eat something. You have to eat, and now your body doesn't have as much to metabolize against it. So it's almost like a slow motion eating disorder if it's not done under extreme care of somebody who's
Hmm.
saying you need to lift, you need to
Hmm.
exercise, and you've got to eat right. So, so that's really it's a slippery slope if it's not handled correctly.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly our position. Is that there's the context and nuances lost. People are looking added to the list of American culture, the flash in the pan of the quick fix,
Yeah.
and these potential long term side effects
Well,
of
and
what.
the other side of it, Will, is there are many people who just knowing that it's there aren't changing their lifestyle at all because someday they're thinking their health insurance is going to cover it. So that's going to clean it up all for them now. So they don't need to
Yeah.
do any healthy lifestyle attention. And so
Uh-huh.
they're getting worse before they
So
get
it's
better because
yeah.
they know that the GLP-1's there. So it's like burn the
Yeah.
candle at both sides.
Yeah, well, I've seen that. I've seen people that they want to take it and insurance won't cover it, so they basically are waiting till their A1C gets higher so it's covered. They're waiting till they're sicker so they can get this medication. Yeah, it's insanity. But then you, not to use that term around you, I
Yes.
apologize. But but this both and approach, I think, has its place. Like we've had success with marrying in the lifestyle aspect of it, the physical activity of aspect of it, with specifically microdosing peptides like semaglutide has its place where it's like the body's making these things anyways, GLP-1 agonists. Can we kind of pull some of this and have a both and not either or approach?
Yeah.
But you're right. Those sort of warning label or instruction manual with these peptides isn't happening because that's not these long form conversations aren't happening. And then you talk about an industry that isn't really adept when it comes to talking about health. They're just adept at giving out pharmaceuticals.
And well, the economics are so compelling that it's really not in anybody's interest who is in control of it to slow the roll and say, we really don't totally understand what the outcome or consequence of this is.
Yeah.
Some people have a real issue. They have some real health issues after using a GLP-1, but we don't know what
Yeah.
the comorbidity or what could happen in 5 years after
Yeah.
this. And that's the cautionary tale that I sure don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. The muscle loss, the gastroparesis long term, other inflammatory issues. My friend, this has been a great conversation. Before we go, at the end of every episode, we have your art of being well. I want to just throw out a few questions that come to mind. What is the weirdest or most out of the box thing that you've done for your wellness that you're willing to admit on a podcast?
Um, well, I think cold plunging is truly an insane one. Like it's cold right now, and something about waking up at 5:30 in the morning, going outside and getting into 45-degree water is just dumb. Like it feels stupid, but it is the most invigorating thing and sets my whole day up. Um, and quite honestly, I'll take a cue from the program that we worked on together, that you and
Yeah.
Autumn worked on, the Belle Vitale program. I have never paid attention to what stress, what sort of impact my disregard of stress is having on my health.
Hmm.
And once, when we were working on the program, even though it's for women, I started to realize that the stress aspect of that program
Hmm.
pertained to me too. And
Yeah.
I started to do the breathing exercises that Autumn put in the program. And wow, what a dramatic impact on my productivity for the day
Hmm.
and my ability to make decisions that were not emotional, but were rational. So I just got smarter once I reduced my stress and I
Yeah.
slept better. And so I would say those are my two things.
I love it. I apologize. I meant to ask you that. I just there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Not to derail us, but yes, as you touched on, I want everybody to know. Autumn, I've known her for years. We kind of talked throughout this conversation. She's done amazing things with together, you and her together. She was working on a hormone program that kind of marries a lot of what I stand for as far as nutrition, mindful movement, targeted supplementation support, and she wanted my functional medicine perspective on it. So I'm honored to be teaming up with you and Autumn on this project in the way that I could. For people that don't know, you touched on it, but I want to give it the time that it deserves because it's so cool. It's such a great program. Can you explain for people what it is?
Well, Autumn's the best to do that one. I think you should have her on. Okay,
Yeah,
But
for
but
sure, for sure.
but
Yeah.
literally, here's somebody who created a thing, 4-week gut protocol, to solve her. She was, like I said, the best entrepreneurial activities are ones solving your own problem. So she solved her own. She did a deep dive to figure out what's going on. Why is her gut creating a problem? Because she eats well, she's a fitness professional, nutrition expert, and so she created this thing, and then huge hit for us, the 4-week gut protocol on 4 weeks for everybody. But then a couple of years later, like she's suffering again. Like, what's that about? And she did a deep dive and got all these labs and realized that it was her hormones, even though she might not have been in perimenopause, I guess you call it. And like something was really off. Her cortisol curve, insulin resistance was all messed up. And rather than just medicate it, she wanted to see what her lifestyle was that was contributing to it. And over the course of 2 years, I watched her put together a program that is so radically different from the
Mhm.
track Pilates fitness that she did to give you a good workout without adding more stress to your overall ecosystem, a, a nutrition approach to help women get control of sugar and balance the macros in a way that would support their hormones, stress reduction with breathing exercises, and a couple of supplements that I know you helped oversee, or just make sure that we were checking the right boxes. And the results that we saw from 12 weeks of Belvital were like nothing I've seen in 26 years. Like
Mhm.
every test group participant lost weight. We had a woman, beautiful woman, lost 27, almost 27 pounds, and but it's the non-scale victories that she was finally able to concentrate again, and not getting night sweats anymore. So like this, I could go on for another hour and I won't, but I will say this is emblematic of the evolution of Beachbody to BODi, to being more about the holistic experience of your life, so that we're supporting the best, a life that you will love to live
Mhm.
without having to just medicate it to solve it. And
Yeah.
Autumn's the best spokesperson for that. You're a great spokesperson for that. And by the way, what you're doing on behalf of children and trying to get dyes out of cereals and all that stuff, like what you
Thank you.
do is, I respect it so much. And it was a
Thanks,
real
Carl.
honor to have you involved in the Belvital program.
Thanks, Carl. It means a lot to me. And I'll put it in the show notes. The Belvital program. I'll put it. Everybody, go check the show notes. And of course, I'll have Autumn on too. We could talk even more about it. All right. Next question is: what is a book that you've read recently, or just anytime, that sticks out when I ask this question? It could be fiction or nonfiction. That was just paradigm shifting for you.
Mm.
I'm getting
Um,
kind of a running book club list for the
yeah.
art of being well. So
Well, I'll
I'm
tell
add it to
you
the list.
that there's, I would say there's two. One of them, I don't think I've ever said this really in public, but So I'll give you the easy one first because it's my all-time favorite book. It's called Illusions by Richard Bach. Short little book, and it's fiction, but it's the adventures of the reluctant Messiah, and it's an approach to life that basically is teaching that we talk about what's the meaning of life, what's the purpose, and what if God said, "I want you to be happy for every day you're alive." What if that was the purpose of life, that you manifest that? And so that book, I'll pick that up at least once a year and give it a quick read. And the other is this is one I don't know, I don't want to go too far into, but A Course of Miracles is an absolutely amazing guideline to helping you understand the role of forgiveness, and including of yourself, and what the ego can bring to your life that is destructive, that you need to pay attention to. I guess that's the way I would say it in a Cliff Notes version. But those are if I get two books on the list for our club, that's what I would put in.
Amazing answers. Amazing answers. Okay. Next question, last question, is a lot of people that are very successful in their careers or in their life, as you are, there's normally a piece of advice that they remember early on in their career that governed a lot, and that was been a through line, a thread through their career. What's that advice for you?
Yeah, very simple. Never quit. And it's a really easy thing to say, but until you're in the fire of, I have a company that we took public that has been just such a tragic process of navigating the post-pandemic environment. And like we talked about, the change in fitness and nutrition, like what's happened in these dynamics. Mm-hmm. I've had to navigate that in a way that many times would have been easy to be like, hey, there's just no market for this, I'm out. But we're helping too many people, and the market is too big for me to quit. And so I just refuse until they tell me to get the heck out. I'm not going to quit. And I'm sure that there's people who are just like, why am I bothering with this? And you're bothering with it because there's just nothing better than facing the obstacle. And as they say in Stoicism, the obstacle becomes the way. And that's how you solve problems that nobody else solved before, because you're the one that didn't quit on the obstacle. So that's the thing that I try to live by.
Deep wisdom, my friend. I love it. Tell people where to go. Tell them about your podcast, all the things you have going on.
Well, yeah, so we're on YouTube. Funny to say. It's called The BODi Experience, BODi. But you just go to BODi.com, and that's where you can find out all things about BODi. You can sign up for a subscription. You can buy a program. That was something original that we did, where you don't have to subscribe. You can just buy the program that you want, and you'll have access as if it was a DVD, right? And that's where you can get more information on the Belle Vitale program for women's hormone health. And I think people are going to find that to be a real enlightening renaissance for them if they've suffered for a long time. So just go to BODi.com.
Carl, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Will.